For more on this, let's bring in Evan Siegfried, Republican strategist and author of GOP GPS, and Jessica Tarlov, Senior Director of Research at Bustle.com, author of America in the Age of Trump, and a Fox News contributor. Welcome to you both.
Thanks, Eric.
News of Donald Trump Jr.'s meeting with a Russian lawyer was breaking last week at this time. We talked about it then. This morning, the president tweeted about the fallout. You may have seen it at the top of our show. He wrote, "Hillary Clinton can illegally get the questions to the debate and delete 33,000 emails, but my son Don is being scorned by the fake news media." And he followed up with this: "With all of its phony, unnamed sources and highly slanted and even fraudulent reporting, fake news is distorting democracy in our country." Effective?
For his base. I don't think anybody else. And I think his base, and even in terms of this, is actually going to be dwindling at this point. It's very clear if you watch the last week of interviews that people in the Trump administration have given, from Seb Gorka to Kellyanne Conway to the president's own Twitter feed, that their notion of how to handle this is to just distract and try to go after fake news, so that when something does come out that's real and substantive, which I believe these Don Jr. emails are the beginning of, that they can just brush it all away and try to keep that 35% secure.
You're agreeing, Evan?
I do. When the president and his legal team have come out and talked about this, they have not denied a single part of the story so far. They've only confirmed it, and their shifting explanations from each breaking part of the story has undercuts any future disclosures that have happened. First, it was a meeting that wasn't a campaign meeting. It was about Russian adoption. Then it was a campaign meeting. Now it came out yesterday, on day 8 of the scandal, that the Trump campaign hired Donald Trump Jr.'s lawyer 2 weeks before this even came out and paid him $50,000. And that actually means legally that Donald Trump Jr. was in a campaign meeting by hiring him for this.
The president said most people would have taken this meeting, that it was opposition research. It's hard to argue with that.
I've done opposition research, and I would not have taken this meeting. I might have sent somebody who was an intermediary, and I would have tried to figure out who this was. But if you actually have somebody who's claiming to be here on behalf of the Russian government, the second I read that part, I walk to my campaign counsel's office and I say, "I just got this. This is a little screwy. Can you please help me and advise me on what to do?" That clearly didn't happen.
I think that any campaign would have done that, especially one that's running for president or about to seal up the nomination there. I mean, I was really taken this morning seeing Trump's lawyer on TV saying, actually, this is the Secret Service's fault. Why did they let these people in here? As if this is what the Secret Service does. They don't do that. They protect people. They don't vet your contacts or who you're having a meeting with. And all of this deflection, I'm not saying that it's necessarily helping Democrats, because I actually don't think that it is. And we still look like, oh, we're just going on about Russia, Russia, Russia and collusion, and we need to focus on issues. But the idea that going into, Make America Week or whatever it's called, that this is what he's talking about, or just promoting his golf club, which he's still profiting off of, which he did, 3 tweets, I think, on that this weekend, I think is quite sad.
But do you don't think it makes a difference that he wasn't there, that Donald Trump was not there for this meeting?
He was in Trump Tower. We know that from
And that was lied about.
And that's been
They
proven.
said that he wasn't in Trump Tower, and he was.
The Secret Service itself is actually very angry. You could see it in the statement they put out after Jay Sekulow said, well, they were the ones who dropped the ball. They said, no, we were not responsible for screening, and Donald Trump Jr. didn't even have protection at that time. The Secret Service is also not chaperoned to any of these meetings. Remember, John Wayne Gacy met Rosalind Carter, and the Secret Service didn't even screen that out.
That was a random observation, but thank you for that. I mean, Michael Caputo, the former Trump campaign advisor, told a House committee that there was no collusion. He said it very flatly and clearly, there was no collusion.
Well, there was intent to collude, and his emails do make that clear when he says, I don't know what this, but I love it. I mean, he wanted dirt on the Hillary campaign. He knew that it was coming from someone associated with the Russian government, and he was completely comfortable with that. The evolving story, I think we're at 5 iterations from Don Jr. as to what this meeting was about. But from the get-go, from his actual emails, which he did not release because he's transparent and honest, he released them because the New York Times said you have X amount of time to deal with this, however, and that's why they came out, that this was someone who was excited about the prospect of getting information that you couldn't help but think had been hacked.
But this, again, this is not the president. This is the son of a presidential candidate.
But it's an investigation into the whole
campaign.
campaign.
Senior advisor of the campaign.
Not a hardened politician, though. This is someone who's not familiar.
Is incompetence an excuse? That's the thing everyone says. Paul Ryan says it all the time.
He wasn't a hardened politician, but Paul Manafort should have known. And you know who's actually winning right now? Vladimir Putin. Because when you actually go out and you see what the Russian lobbyist who actually was there and has links to the GRU, the Russian counterintelligence, is doing, he's telling the Associated Press, oh yeah, we left a binder full of information. I don't know what they did with it. That that is designed to create chaos and disunity in the United States.
You
and
mentioned
it's succeeding.
you mentioned Jay Sekulow, who he was on Fox News Sunday this morning, and he went on the offensive, saying that there was nothing against the law in that meeting, while he criticized James Comey's conduct and his book deal. Listen to this.
The entire premise upon which this entire investigation has been based was based on illegally leaked information, including conversations with the President of the United States. And today it's announced that James Comey has signed a book deal where he's going to discuss all this. So you tell me, you think that's okay?
Is it? Is that okay?
Well, I would say that Jay Sekulow, I've never understood why he would criticize somebody for actually getting a book deal. Good for James Comey being able to get probably high six figures, low seven figures for that. But I would say that, you know, it was not illegal, and that's true, but it's a terribly bad judgment. And when you have all of these stories out there that are alleging collusion between the campaign, it reinforces that narrative, especially when the administration has undercut its own credibility with each shifting iteration of the story.
We also don't know the full story yet. I mean, we don't know what was in that binder. We don't know what information is exchanged because Donald Trump Jr., if the binder exists at all. Donald Trump Jr., Jared Kushner, Paul Manafort have all been so slippery about this meeting. I mean, consider the fact that Jared Kushner revised his security clearance form to add 100 new contacts with foreign agents, did not mention this meeting at all. We went from Don Jr. saying, oh, I had a meeting, and Paul and Jared stopped by, to the email proof that clearly he forwarded it right to them, not to counsel, which any sensible person would do, but right to Jared and Paul Manafort, and they all decided they're going to go to this meeting.
There's also a question missing, which is the Wall Street Journal reported on Monday morning that campaign associates remember an internal campaign email roughly around the time of this campaign or this meeting asking what was the internal position on the Magnitsky Act. If that email exists and it was sent before the meeting, it means there were more communications that have not been turned over. And if it exists and it came out after the meeting, it undercuts the claim that we dismissed this outright, because why would you be asking about this?
And also adds to the case that you just started to make about how Vladimir Putin is the real beneficiary of this. If the Trump administration or key figures within it were thinking about revising our stance on the Magnitsky Act, which is one of the only things that has actually worked in terms of punishing the Russians, what does that say about our president and the people who are close to him?
Well, what does it say about our country and our government if all the attention in Washington is being focused on these meetings and what may or may not have happened before the president took office, and there's so little focus on the business of America and the work of the people?
Well, some senior Hill aides for Republicans are actually glad that this is taking the heat off of the BCRA and health care, because it's such a bad bill that
we're going to get to that in a second. First, I just want to talk about the Made in America initiative that's going on this week, where the president is now trying to shift some focus to U.S. workers and jobs and keeping manufacturing at home. This is his agenda for the week.
Yeah.
And he wants to, at least he says, he wants to start getting things done.
That would be lovely.
Making this country a better place. And creating more jobs.
Everyone wants that, and everyone wants as many products as possible to be made in this country. I'm wondering if he's going to talk to Ivanka about her own line, which isn't made here in America. The White House has apparently dodged comment on that. I think it's great. I think the president does well when he shows up at a carrier plant and he talks to people and he tells them what he's going to do for them. But if then 1,000 jobs actually end up leaving just a few months later, you're not going to be successful like that. And if you're tweeting about Russia yourself, you're not going to be successful.
Okay, but just real quick, to be fair, his manufacturing, his wife's, his daughters, any products they had being manufactured those deals were cut under a different administration.
But don't you think when your father or your husband or you become president of the United States of America on a Make America Great Again agenda, that maybe you undo those deals and you find an American plant to do it? I'm sure there are plenty of people in America who would like to go to work.
The president is spot on with all of these weeks. It's good to focus on energy and jobs and made in America. But there's one thing that's absolutely missing that other administrations on both the left and the right would be doing. They'd be working with Congress so that when they have Made in America Week, tomorrow they'd have a member of the House and a member of the Senate propose a bill that coincides with it. And they'd have that go forward with 50 co-sponsors in the House, 10 to 20 in the Senate. But they haven't done that yet. They're not working together on both sides of Pennsylvania Avenue.
Clearly they are not. And you mentioned health care. The vote on the Senate bill was unexpectedly delayed, as we've reported, because of Senator McCain's surgery. You both think they needed this pause.
Oh, well, that bill wasn't going to pass. You already have Rand Paul and Susan Collins, who are hard-nosed, and you have a bunch of senators from states that have huge amounts of Medicaid recipients who are cautious about this. And the idea, Mitch McConnell saying, oh, it's okay to push through the Medicaid cuts, it'll never happen. It's not enough. You can't make promises like that. Then you have, Ted Cruz and Mike Lee who want their amendments in exactly the same language that they originally designed them. You're not going to be able to do that and swing any moderates towards you. So they do need this break. But start on tax reform, something that might be attainable for you.
Well, actually, I think that tax reform is going to be handled a lot better than the BCRA and healthcare was. You're already hearing about the White House has been in long planning, and everybody who's been involved in these meetings who are outside of the White House are very impressed with how much detail, how many their messaging strategy that is being prepped. Look for it to come out in mid-August when they want to have a vote or at least a score by Labor Day.
As far as health care is concerned, the Democrats and Republicans have not worked at all on this together. It seems like we're getting to the point where perhaps Republicans will be forced to work with the Democrats, even if they don't want to.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're going to have to work with Heidi Heitkamp and Joe Manchin and Claire McCaskill and Democrats that are in Trump states.
To find someone, anyone that will sign on.
Yeah, but I mean, so much of this is ego. I find, at least on both sides here, the idea that if it's called Obamacare, some Republicans just don't want it. And then Democrats are obviously going to hold hard to that the title is what makes it. That's not what makes it. It's whether you're delivering affordable, quality health care. And I wish they would move past that because there is a lot of room for compromise. And I believe Senator Schumer has said publicly, and he's also privately apparently been talking to Republicans about places where we can compromise because we all want the same thing at the end of the day. But as you said, working together is just not a popular idea.
When Senator McCain comes back, which we all expect that he will, is there a chance they would get the 50 votes they need and the vice president could break the tie?
If we are to get to the 50 votes we need when Senator McCain gets back, what we're going to need to have is a drastically different bill. That's the reality. As Jesse said earlier, if you if you make any changes that are to appease the moderates, you're going to lose the conservatives, and vice versa. What they need to actually do is start working on certain solutions that the president campaigned on, such as the removal of state lines, and inserting that into the bill, authorizing CMS to actually modernize and open up Medicaid and Medicare to people who use telemedicine. And that would drastically lower costs, not only of coverage, but it would drastically increase the quality of care.
Rand Paul got pretty specific in his objection to the current Senate bill. Let's listen to what he had to say.
The real problem we have is, we won 4 elections on repealing Obamacare, but this bill keeps most of the Obamacare taxes, keeps most of the regulations, keeps most of the subsidies, and creates something that Republicans have never been for, and that's a giant insurance bailout super fund. That's not a Republican idea to give taxpayer money to a private industry that already makes $15 billion in profit.
Clearly not a fan.
Well, no, he's actually a Republican.
I would say that it's really time that we start working and listening to our state's governors, because that's who's really going out and facing the opposition. If you look at the governors across the country, the vast majority of them, including Republicans, are opposed to this. Governor Sandoval, Kasich, you're seeing Governor Wolf in Pennsylvania, obviously Governor Cuomo here in New York, but all of them look at this and see these bills that are being proposed as just massive tax hikes on their states, because they're going to need to increase taxes in order to pay for care and coverage for their citizens.
And he's right, because the Republicans had 7 years to propose something decent, and they just sat on it, promising it over and over again. Everyone got comfortable with the subsidies, for instance. And then the idea that the Republicans are going to be the party to rip that away from them is completely untenable. So now the Republicans actually can't have a foundationally conservative bill because Americans have gotten used to it, and the popularity of Obamacare continues to grow as the other side just proposes mess after mess.
We have to leave it there.
Okay.
Jessica, Evan, we thank you for being here.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you for having us.
All right.